All right, we're gonna get started on the Gktech angle kit for the G35. Now, there's a couple things that you probably will need. Some of these things you probably won't need because it depends on what you're doing. But for me, I have to raise the coils just a little bit to get the front just a little bit higher, so that way the angle kit can move both ways without rubbing against anything. Next would be like some channel locks, a flathead, like a big one, if you need, just to separate things. The adjustables to get the tie rod off and everything. Another channel lock just in case. I have a 14, 15, but I know the 14 is probably what I'm going to end up using. But if it ends up not being a 14, I have a 17 millimeter. We'll find out. Could be 14, 17, or 19. We'll see. Half-inch ratchet with an extension if needed. And some needle nose to pull out the little cotter pin and such. Obviously you need your jacks. Now for me, I like to use ramps too for this type of situation, since it has to do with your alignment. You want to keep it actually pretty close. So in order to tell what you need to adjust, it's good to have it on the ground and adjust it. So best way to do that would be flat surfaces like ramps. So right now I have it off the ramps just so I could show you guys what the stock angle looks like. So we're gonna turn it all the way, and it likes to push back on you too, which you'll probably notice is different with the angle kit on. So you see this is all the way out. That's all the way. That's steering wheel to the max. Can't pull any further. All the way in. And it's not horrible, but it'll get a lot better after we put this ankle kit on. And obviously this isn't on the ground, so it's not 100%, but if you look like there, will just comes out the corner. But you're gonna see quite a bit of angle added in just a few. And see, look, it went back on its own. I didn't even do anything. It counter steered itself. Alright, so we're going to drop her down on the ramps and get started taking things apart. I'll show you in just a few. Now there's probably two important tools I probably forgot to mention. Number one, hammer. Number two, some tools to take off your wheels and such, because you are going to need to take them off. I probably forgot to mention that because I made it look like they were going to be on the whole time. But they just need to be on the ramps for the actual adjustments that you're going to make when you adjust the tie rod. So, first step here, you're going to want to loosen your tie rod nut, which I've already done on both sides. And then you're going to want to take out the cotter pin right there. That's what we're going to do. Once we take off the cotter pin, we're going to loosen that nut and then hit on the side over here. Right there. Hit there pretty hard with the hammer so that this comes out, because it is going to be kind of like compressed in there. It's been in there for a while. You know, it's been probably built up some corrosion and such in that area, and it needs to be replaced anyways. So let's get started on that. All right, we got the cotter pin out. Sometimes you got to break it a little bit to get it out, so we ended up doing that. We're not going to need it anyways. Ended up being a 19. Like I said, it could be possibly a 19, so it ended up being a 19 millimeter nut on top of this. So we're gonna loosen that, bang this should pop, and then we should be able to get it the rest of the way out and get the new one in. I'm doing one per side. one on each side, one at a time, I guess is what I should have said. All right, I'll be right back with you after I loosen that nut. All right, we've got it nice and loose. Now we're gonna hit it a good couple times, probably right here. Don't hurt yourself. Make sure you get yourself have enough leverage. Let's try to take her the rest of the way off. All right, now we've got that out. Now, a trick I'm going to tell you guys. I'm using both of these because it was kind of being a little bit of a bizash to come off. So we're going to spray it with some WD-40. I prefer PB Blast, but this is all I got right now. I'm going to do that to both sides. Let it sit for like maybe 5-10 minutes, and then it should come off a lot easier. All right, that's one of my tips and tricks. All right, tie rod out. Next thing you're going to want to do, so right here, there's two 14mm bolts holding in this bracket. You're going to want to take those out, take out the bracket. It's pretty easy. And let's move on to getting the angle kit on. Woohoo, the fun part. All right, and then you have one more cotter pin and nut to remove. So if you still have this arm in, which I do, you're going to need to remove this nut, because that is where the bracket for the angle kit's going to go. It will say you need to have this centered once everything's all bolted up. Right now it's not too important, but once everything's all tightened up, you need to have the spherical bearing centered. And then this, definitely, I mean, take it out, retighten it, do what you got to do to make sure it is good. Just make sure everything's good, because you don't want to have to go back under there and some shit fall apart and break. So make sure everything's nice and tight. This is going to go on the side with those two 14mm bolts that you took out. So this is basically going to go right under, like so. Let's see if I can, right under like so. That nut that you took off for this arm, you're going to put through that hole, because you're going to put the bolt that's coming out from the arm through that hole. So get that on there, tighten everything up. Let's look at it in just a second when everything's going to get adjusted. What I probably suggest before doing that, right, though, before you bolt it all up, now other videos probably show differently, but put it on your inner already. Just put the tie rod on, and then, you know, you can make your adjustments after. Just keep everything pretty close to what they were in order to not have to make such major adjustments before you get an alignment done. All right, now you got those two 14mm bolts on. You've got the tie rod on, nothing really tight. You can easily, you know, move things if you need to. That way you need to make adjustments. Tighten those just a little bit, not tight, like keep them, you know, maybe 4 threads out or something like that. So that way you can move this around really easily and get the nut on there and everything. All right, be right back. I suggest, if you have an impact like I do, so here's another trick you're gonna need to know. Depending on your condition of the control arm, if you have it and blah blah blah, you're gonna have to push down on that sucker while you hold the bracket up. So I kind of use my one hand to push this down, hold this up as much as you can, because you need it to thread through here. You got to adjust this a little bit. You have to move it a little bit so you actually, because there's a very small amount of space for it to kind of go in correctly. And then just gun that sucker on as much as you can, and then tighten from there. Torque to whatever the hell, and get everything all tightened up and check her out. All right, that bolt underneath the bracket, just want you to know, it's not any of the other ones that we've been using, which is 17, 19, and 14. It is an 18mm. Thank you, Gktech. Another tip I'd like to add, so the ones that are already on the bracket, right, the sleeves, these are the shorter sleeves. They give you an additional longer sleeve, and it's probably, you know, 5mm longer or so, 10mm longer, not much, but that makes a difference. And then you're all done with the bracket. Everything's pretty much all tightened up, so that way when we get the alignment, we can make sure that we have this centered. It's kind of hard to pull right now, but I'll probably do it in just a little bit. And then you would want to remove, for the inner tie rod, the boot. So we're going to get started on that, and then we're going to complete one full side. All right, some more tips and tricks I didn't see in the other videos as well. So depending on what is on your boot, mine had one of these dinky dinky rinky dinky spin metal thingies. A zip tie is going back on it, but still. So you have to untwist these. Sometimes they break. Use a needle nose, untwist them, and eventually it pops off. And then I was able to get enough space to get my adjustable in there. And with this, it's righty loosey or lefty tighty, I guess you should say. So I had to push the adjustable that way forward, so in order to get the inner off. And back to the rack spacers. So we're gonna get up and go over there. All right, we've got everything all tightened up, all buttoned up, back together. We got the zip tie back on the boot. So what I did is took off that little twisty thing on the boot here, undid the pin, pulled the boot down, undid the inner tie rod, then you can split it apart. The thicker rack spacer, I put it on the rack first, and then I twist in the tie rod enough to basically fit the other one in. Then you have to twist it back in order to basically get everything all settled. So you have to, you know, righty tighty, lefty loosey with the inner tie rod, but you have to have the tie rod, like, give it some slack, I guess you could say, in order for it to move forward into the threads. Because if you just keep trying to spit it in, it's never going to thread in, because you've pulled it back, you know, you've twisted it back however far until you were able to get it on. And then once you get it on, to get it to thread in, you have to basically tighten this back up. So if I'm explaining that right, I'm hoping I'm explaining it right, but that's basically how it was. Then once you have it all tightened up, all buttoned up, make sure, you know, you get your everything straight here. And then, you know, obviously you're going to need to do an alignment or you know, do it yourself, whichever is, you know, the means of how you're going to do it. But one side is done. Now you just got to do the other side. Just repeat method on that side, just with the smaller spacer for the passenger side for the rack spacer. And that's about it. That was a good little show for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this. And hopefully I get to test it out sometime soon, later next year, 2025. Have a good one. All right, guys, I'm back at it. So I just wanted to, I kind of went over something again and figured out that I fucked up. So what I actually have to do to correct this, right? So what I ended up doing is I put the wrong rack spacer on the wrong side. After double checking with one of the videos that Gktech shows with centering the steering rack, this big one is supposed to go on the passenger side and the small one on the driver's side. And then that makes kind of a difference, because these rods, remember how I went with both long ones? Well, I fucked that up too. This one is gonna stay the long rod because the slip-on spacer is going over here, but on the passenger side I got to put the short rod, because for the big rack spacer you need the shorter one to make sure you have adjustability. So yeah, so basically short rod, big spacer, long rod, small spacer. Just wanted to make sure I corrected that. And then once you do that, the next little clip will be me telling you guys about centering the steering rack. So I could kind of just do that now, but I'll show you with measurement kind of later. Is to get them close, right? You have to measure from the end of where your spacer goes to the inside of the rack. But you could also, I mean, you could also measure from the outside as well if you want to keep it as straight as possible with like a measuring tape or whatever. Like you can measure from, you know, the lip to the end where the rack spacer meets the steering rack. Wow, I can't believe I was having a brain fart on that. The same thing on the other side, they just have to be even. So for the slip-on, you would measure the whole length, you know, from here to the end of the slip-on. But from on the big rack spacer side, you're going to measure from the end to where the rack spacer meets the rack itself. So hopefully I explained that right, and I'll be able to get that all adjusted and aligned later, and we'll upload all these clips later to YouTube. Haha.